All right, Eloise, tell us who you are, what you do.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Eloise Leeson. I'm a communications consultant and linguist by trade, background in the discipline of linguistics, which is sort of the science and art of language, not in terms of how many languages do you speak. Look at things like critical discourse analysis, corpus linguistics. My consultancy, Olim, helps businesses to close the gap between what you think you're saying and what is actually received by your customers.
Wow.
That's very good. That's a very succinct and impressive, yeah.
Jordana, you gotta be it.
I always try something different here. I'll just be quick. I'm Jordana Zeldin. I am a sales coach who has a coaching consultancy called Spring Training, and a big part of what I do is help individual sellers and sales teams come home to themselves in their selling and be more human, so that they can be more connected to themselves and therefore to their prospects.
Excellent. All right, Jacob, tell us about it's Peta Consulting, and then obviously who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So I'm Jacob Fakheri. I am a partner at Peta Consulting, and what we're doing is essentially ops as a service. We provide essentially sales ops in a box. We diagnose, your sales ecosystem, optimize it, and then we run it. And we do that at usually less than the cost of an entire sales operations team. My background is just longtime sales support kind of person. I've always been in and around sales operations. Most recently as a sales ops leader, it was kind of there that I figured out, these sales operations systems, they require a lot of upfront work to get them going. But once they're going, they become, essentially just monitor and maintain. And companies are spending a ton of money on that part rather than the optimize and get it built out. So that's where Peta came from. And I guess, what I wanted to get, here today was, I'm not a salesperson. I've always been in and around sales, but I've never been the salesperson. And I'm awful at it. I'll throw it out there. I'm terrible at it. And so, we're sending out messages, we're doing what we can, but we're kind of, me and my partner, neither one of us are salespeople. And so we're just kind of starting in it, me after 10 or 15 years around sales ops, and her after about 20 years in sales ops. So just kind of would love a lot of feedback in terms of how we can get better quickly.
You got the right crowd here. My first question is, let's say Eloise and Jordana are potentially ideal customers. What would their roles be? Like CRO, COO?
So typically in the past, we've been reaching out to sales leaders, but we figured out there is actually a really big conflict of interest in reaching out to sales leaders. One, they typically don't own the IT piece of it, or they don't own the process. It's sort of like spread out a few different places in an org. And two, at least with sales leaders or CROs, there's also a sort of positional power thing in terms of they don't want to bring in outside consultants or outside services. If they're bringing in people, they want it to be internal headcount, because it kind of helps a little bit.
Yeah.
Hey, I manage a team of 50 versus I manage a team, consultants. So now what we're doing is we're focusing on CEOs as well as private equity and venture capitalists that are sort of owning the company and have less conflict of interest. They want the job done. They don't necessarily care how it gets done.
Yeah.
Question from me, what kind of problems, how are you articulating the problems that you solve? So when it comes to those people, and obviously it might take a little while to figure this out because you're still trying to work out who that ICP is, but how do you articulate the problem that you solve? So when you come in and say, we're going to do this for you, how do you help people understand what it is that they're struggling with that they may not have identified for themselves?
The biggest one, the one that we found to be very successful, is if we come in and we say, how do your board presentation, right? Are you going up in front of your board and you are, saying, hey, our win rate's this much and our pipeline looks like X. And then they sort of, the board, of course, asks some more difficult questions and you can't answer. How flustered getting in a board presentation. And when we put it that way and we say, you know, what we come in and do is make sure that you're not going to be flustered anymore, that you're going to have not just the facts in front of you, you're going to have the answers in front of you. You're going to be able to say our win rate's this, and it's this because of these 3 things. And we're working on improvements in these 3 underlying things to get you going to that. So we sort of, that tends to be where we start in terms of how we sell to the CEO side.
What are the long-term, sorry, Jordana, jump in.
I'm just gonna quickly boost your confidence, Jacob. So you say like you're a terrible salesperson or something. People who think they're very good salespeople often don't understand how vital it is to start with like the emotional experience of the problem, like you just did. So I want to give you some props here, that the fact that you're kind of empathetically getting into the feelings, the emotions of the feeling of being flustered of your prospect is a very good start. So I just want to throw that out there. Yeah.
That helps me feel a little, I'm super nervous, by the way. When I'm nervous, I talk a lot, so please forgive me.
That's okay. We're all, I think, well, all, I'm definitely in the same camp of, if you hadn't gathered from my awkward chat earlier. But it's, as Jordana says, that the emotive piece there is so powerful. And that's why when I ask about how are you demonstrating that you understand the pain or the problem that your prospect is going through is so vital, because when it comes to really honing that prospect, leveraging certain emotional experiences, phrases, language, certain connotations of certain words. So flustered is a great one, because when you're a CEO and you're sitting there in front of the board and you're the guy that has the answers, or you're the person that has the answers, and you're expected to know and you don't, it's an entire crisis of confidence that starts to trickle out from that. To kind of circle back on myself, what are the long-term benefits then of not being flustered in that board meeting? If you were just to extrapolate the experience of now you're there, you're in control, you understand what's going on, you can answer all those awkward and unpleasant questions, what's the impact of that long-term, not just personally, but in terms of the wider organization as well?
You know, we were just doing that this morning actually with the story brand thing. Jeff Risley kind of introduced me to story brand the last time I was on 5 on 5. And so what we put in there was, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, personally speaking, we want to cement your reputation as a very knowledgeable, well-respected leader who, you know, understands what's going on in their company and has actions and plans to address them. You know, what we want to, you know, in terms of the greater company, it's also centering that company around data, around the idea that, you know, leadership is always going to make decisions, but your job as an individual contributor or further on down the line removed from the CEO is just to make sure that the CEO has the correct information in front of them to make those decisions. Because if they don't, they're going to make a decision, it's going to be a bad one. And if it's a bad one, it's going to affect you pretty badly. So that's sort of how we put it out there.
One question, or maybe like reframe I have is, let's say you're reaching out, I don't know how often you reach out to a CFO, but in my mind, I'm thinking, you know, if they're in front of the board, a question they might get, and I don't know if you see this, and I hear this often, that a lot of companies, like they're kind of drunk on technology, right? They're all like, let's get another piece of software and it'll solve our problem. And, you know, sometimes people are like, okay, great, you have this amazing tech stack, and it could be 2 in your stack, or it could be 12, but people start to go like, what are all these things doing? I'm pretty sure you guys help make sure, you know, A, do you need 10? And then, you know, are they actually working? And so that might be something I would imagine the CFO kind of gets put on the spot for, like, hey, you guys are spending all this, you can't give me these metrics. So, you know, back to what Jordana and Eloise were saying, I think, you know, when you're getting into that outreach, I think something emotive like that around, you know, are you still feeling like you're not going to be able to answer these questions and be embarrassed that you're spending this money, you don't know what's happening, hey, blah, and you know, you want to be in a better position for that. And I think, you know, just to add to that, I think the deck that you sent is really great, but to me, I don't feel like there's anything compelling. So back to the emotive thing, you know, let's say we're reaching out to Belal, he's the CFO, and we're saying, hey, you know, we can see you've been posting these roles, you got all these people, you're buying all the software, but do you actually know if this is working? And when you go and present to the board, are they going to be like, hey man, like, what you spent all this, is it actually working? And then when you go and send them this deck, to me, I'd want almost something where there's like it's almost like too much information. Like it'll almost be a simple, like, okay, after I've triggered that emotion that, yes, I think you can help me. What's that next step? The document is a little bit, it's almost like too much. Anyway, that was a long rant.
No. That makes a lot of sense though, because yeah, we've been looking at the deck again this week in preparation for this call, and I was just like, oh my God, this thing is ridiculously long.
Well, and I guess just to bring Belal up to speed, right? So, we've had a little bit of feedback from Jordana and Eloise, but the use case here or scenario, I think, is you're a COO, probably C-level, because Jacob was saying, like, he finds sales leaders are often, it's like a conflict of interest, and I could see how they might be like, well, you mean they don't want to admit that maybe they have all these tools and they're not really working, but somebody looking at the numbers might want to go, yeah, we have this tech stack, I still can't get all the metrics I'm looking for, but what's that trigger for them to say, what Jacob has just said to me makes me want to talk to him again. And I'll just be blunt, that the deck, I'm sure there's a nugget of that in there somewhere, but it's almost too much, right? Like, it's like, if I'm that CRO, I'm gonna be like, I'm not reading 18 pages. I need like one line that says, book a call with me and I'll do something like this. I don't know.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a ton.
Jacob, too, like being new to sales, I often think that well, sellers generally and new sellers assume that, like, because sellers typically have a deck, I need a deck. But something I think can be really helpful to do is just like, see if you can have a conversation and, kind of pitch and discovery conversation without a deck. And then only bring in the deck when you feel like it is absolutely fundamental that you show and really illustrate certain maybe aspects of the platform. Because deck, as sellers, we often can too heavily lean on our decks, which inadvertently puts up a wall and disconnects us from our prospects. So I guess what I'm saying is, rather than starting with a deck, start with the conversation, the discovery, these wonderful problems that you're expressing, and then determine if there's something missing that a deck needs to fundamentally be there to support.
I like that. That's a really good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Jacob, can you give me some context? Sorry, because I missed part of this, so my apologies for making us repeat. What you'll take them straight to the deck when they agree to a meeting, or how's your sales process right now?
So our sales process today is we scour LinkedIn for these companies that are posting for like sales operations director, not manager or analyst, because if they're looking for managers or analysts, we figure they have a pretty robust team already going on, and they're not going to hire an analyst to come in and create something. So if they're looking for a director or a coordinator, those two words tend to indicate they don't have, like, essentially other people are fulfilling the sales operations function. They haven't built it out completely yet. So we find those companies, we message into, in the past it was sales leaders, now we're starting to go more for CEOs. CFO is a really good idea, Francois, I need to add that in. We message them, we just kind of try to connect with them a little bit about, some of the frustrations that they might have. If after that, typically, this is going to sound terrible saying it out loud, I'm going, this is a bad idea. All we ask for is, can we send them a deck? We don't even ask for a call. I just realized that. So
But it's great that you did.
But you're the sales operations expert. You're not the outbound outreach expert. Like, give yourself some like, don't be too hard on yourself.
Don't be too hard on yourself, but I also really want a screenshot of all of our faces the moment that he told us that. Belal's like this, I'm like.
Yeah, but I think Belal's like, I don't know if I have any advice for this guy. I think I just got to tap out.
No. I can understand your buyer's pain, because Todd Capone talks a lot about this in the transparency sale, and this is like well-known social psychology. The more you increase my cognitive load, the less likely I am to buy. Right. So we buy things that are easier to buy, not better. That's why if you look around anywhere in your room, you'll see at least one thing that's cheap, but you bought it because it was super convenient. That's why Amazon is what it is today. It's because of the one-click buy. The
Yeah.
quality of what's on Amazon isn't actually that good, but it's really, really easy to buy. So Todd talks about this in the transparency cell about how the ease of which to buy and the let's say the consistency of what the experience is like is to buy increases your likelihood to buy more than the quality. So even though your deck might have a great explanation, you're making me self-educate about something that I didn't ask to learn about because you reached out to me. So automatically there's a disconnect. You just asked somebody who didn't ask you to tell them about this thing, about a thing, and then you're making them read. And it could be colorful and it could be beautiful and it could be visually stunning, but it's still unsolicited. And that's why the remedy for that is to think about decisions starting in the limbic brain, right? Like the universal buyer's journey is unaware, aware, consideration, evaluation, decision. Those are like the 5 universal steps. So people you're reaching out to are unaware that they need you and unaware who you are. So if you're showing them a deck, which is what people would typically see when they're interested or in consideration, you've skipped 2 steps. You've skipped 2 steps, and it never works well when you do that. Those stages are pretty, those are, unfortunately, we have to adhere to those steps because it's just how our brain works. So I definitely think I would not be sending the deck because you're putting a cognitive load on the buyer, on the prospect that they didn't ask for. And odds are they're totally not. I don't know what the conversion rate is. You can maybe tell me if I'm wrong. Has that been working or has it not been working?
It has not worked. It has not.
Okay. I figured.
The best we have so far that has worked is we did it without a deck. We did it, and at first I was just chalking it up to it was a connection through a friend. But thinking back, I didn't send a deck. We just called. I'm sorry, doing this on my called in. So, but yeah, no, I did it, just pitched it via Zoom call. And the ask was, hey, let's get together and talk about the specifics and over drinks. And it was like, yeah, let's do that. Let's get these other people out with us and let's go forward with that. So, I think I was chalking that up to the wrong thing. I was thinking that was more successful because of the friend when it was probably more successful because I was unintentionally doing it correctly. Real quick, Belal, what was that? 2 things real fast. One is everybody okay downstairs? Because, it's a crack.
Yeah, thank you for asking. It was a little, she got a little cut, but it's okay. It wasn't too serious and I helped clean up. Thank you.
And then 2, you said it was a book called The Transparency Sale.
Yeah, Todd Capone, Transparency Sale.
I don't have a pen, but I'm going to remember that. Transparency Sale. Okay.
Yeah. So he talks a bit about the psychology of when we put that cognitive load on a buyer, like why brands like IKEA are so successful. Because you know what the buying process is going to be exactly. There's no confusion there, right? It's really like you go to IKEA anywhere in the world. Oh, go ahead, Eloise. Sorry.
I was going to say, until you get your IKEA purchase home and then you have to assemble it, and then
Right.
Suddenly it becomes a massive cognitive load and you're swearing at what is basically plywood. But yes, you're absolutely right. Sorry.
Yeah, it's true. That is true. Yeah, and people go there for that whole experience, but like you go any IKEA in the world, you know exactly what to expect. It's all the same.
Something, oh, sorry, Belal, go ahead.
No, that was it. That's it. He wrote an article about it recently that was really well thought out about Costco, IKEA, some of these major brands that have made the purchasing decision really simple.
Go ahead, Jordana.
Well, I was just going to say that, often, and I'm a major fan of Todd, like sometimes when we're approaching selling, we think we have to understand like these external concepts, be they neuroscience or kind of the psychological journey. And those are very important. And then there's also just like a really foundational gut check. Like if somebody contacted me out of the blue and sent me a deck, how engaged and excited would I be to read through it? and like not like almost 100% of the time, it's like not at all. And then that internal gut check can become a really valuable compass in a lot of, you know, how you're approaching your sales process, especially in these early days. Because when you said you were a lousy seller in the top of the call, and then so beautifully and relatably shared your understanding of like the in the trenches problems that these prospects have, and like, oh no, Jacob is definitely not a bad seller. And if with that being the case, we don't want to deprive the prospect the experience of relating and connecting and communicating with you through the sales process. You were the guide, right?
So
Gotcha.
what's some of the language, and you don't have to put like specific scripts, but like, let's say Eloise or Belal. Well, I'll pick on Eloise because she studied linguistics. What would be like that outreach message that you might use that you find typically gets a response?
The shortest ones tend to get a response where we just say, you know, hey, we see that, you know, you have this position posted. It looks like you're trying to build out a sales operations function. And, you know, what we tend to find is at the build stage, you know, that's happening because, you know, of some pretty standardized problems, right? You know, and we try to make them quick, right? Just kind of say there's a lot of normal problems that come in with building out a sales operations function in terms of, you know, you've got a bunch of tech, you have analytics that aren't really telling you what you want them to be telling you. And, you know, you have no enforcement of process anywhere. So people are just kind of doing whatever they want to in terms of getting things in and updating. You know, if you just kind of want this just to work, you know, can we talk? Something like that, you know, just saying, you know, just do you just want it to work? That tends to actually be something that gets a response. At least in the past, it would say, hey, you know, yeah, I'd love to learn more, and then we'd send the deck and it would crash. But the short conversation at first was normally the one that worked.
Here's a question. And I think I probably know the answer. Does the deck sound like the way you talk? Have you read it aloud? Have you taken the deck and some of the core messages in that deck, and have you spoken them aloud to see how they sound?
I have spoken it out loud. I don't know if it sounds like the way I talk, because I do a lot of verbal tics like ums and ahs and stuff. So those aren't in there.
Of course, but you'd hope.
But it's yeah, it's I try to make it slightly more formal than the normally talk.
The only reason that I ask that is because, as Jordana said earlier, you know, you have this really wonderful way of delivering such an empathetic understanding of the real issues that your prospects are going through on a regular basis that you can help them avoid entirely by the sounds of things. And rather than going straight in with a benefit, which is often what a lot of places do, which is like you could save X and Y, you could do this and that, and that's all very valuable. But actually going in and building that relationship, especially to begin with, as you find your feet with the sales process, can sometimes be a really good way of connecting with someone. And I think that being formal absolutely has its place, but there's also a sense of you're not selling yourself, but you are selling who you are and how you help people. And there's as much of an emotional buy in that as there is a logical one. You know, I think that, yes, we have to move people through from their unawareness, their awareness, and Belal, I'm going to mangle the rest of that formula. But in terms of we buy emotionally, and then we justify why logically afterwards. So you being able to connect first is primary on the emotional level, and your language can play into that. So writing in the way that you speak, it builds this sense of familiarity. And I'm not saying you should necessarily stick an and an ah in that LinkedIn outreach message, for example, but I would say that being a little bit more colloquial, using some of the things that you hear your prospects saying on a regular basis and weaving that language into your written copy will mean that when they have that call with you, they're like, I already know this guy. Like I've met Jacob and I know how he sounds, and this is someone I want to connect with, because you're building that rapport, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Following on that, Eloise, what you just said about rapport, I would even venture to say that the strongest way to build rapport is to demonstrate your credibility, as you just so beautifully did by saying, I noticed this about you, and what we're finding industry-wide when people are in these circumstances are these things. That's a very
I would borrow something that I've seen Belal do recently. I think you do it frequently, where you do the video, right? So something visual, like an explainer. So again, low cognitive load. And I've done this before where, so let's say you get that short, message out to them around, being frustrated, and that piques their interest. I think, honestly, I think a lot of the content in the deck could be repurposed. But I think, passing the deck is, I think we're all agreeing that's many, many, many steps down the road, if at all, because it's a lot. Like it's 18 pages. There's good content there. So take whatever tool you want, Loom, Drift, and record your face in the video, and like keep it incredibly simple. Like, here's where you are today, and with some visual, cues, here's what we would do with you, and this is what tomorrow looks like. And just simple, and then send that to them, and maybe it's a minute, maybe it's two. They can watch that, and that's kind of the trigger. Like, do you guys want to have another conversation? But then you've painted, I think, a bit of a picture of what, to Belal was saying, what maybe might be easy. Like, they might be going, what the heck is he going to do? Like, we're trying to hire people. How is he going to come in and solve? But if you can kind of paint that picture, and I might be oversimplifying it, but I don't know. I think everybody might agree with me here. I don't see why in a minute or 2 minutes, you couldn't say, here you are today, here's what we do, in a very simplistic way to get you here.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a ton of sense. Because if we're going in and we're saying we're going to make life easier for you, and our deck is 18 pages, there's a disconnect. It's like, wow, like, yeah, you're very verbose, man. How are you actually going to solve my problem? You talk forever.
I'll give you, Jacob, four constructs you could steal to narrow this messaging. You could pick any one that makes sense for how you talk about it. One is, Francois was alluding to, before and after. You literally send a message as like, before, we've worked with clients, it's typically like this. After, it looks like this. And you are giving that state. I buy a bunch of tech, it's not telling me what it's supposed to. Now it does. There's a before and after. You could also use a construct of love, hate. Like, I love the tech we bought. I hate that it's not telling me what it needs to. So love, hate are very strong words, and that typically triggers an emotion in people. Another one's using the word without. So you'd be like, get this without that. So get the details you need without becoming a sales loft expert. Have your dashboard tell you what you want without instrumenting 17 steps in the settings. So that's another construct you could do. And then the final one is, you could tell them of like a state change. Like, it used to be that you can just buy tech and it works. Now your tech has to work with other tech. It just got complicated quick. What are you doing about it? So there's 4 different constructs you can use, before and after, without, some sort of state of like love, hate, or this change that just occurred. And that's the actual literal language I'd put in your messaging to send to them. And it should also be in your deck somewhere. Because if they connect with any of those forms of messaging, and all of them have their pros and cons, so some products it's easier to say love, hate, some products easier to say this without that. So that's why I'm giving you all 4 to play around with one of them. But that's typically the sort of messaging that people will pick up on, that helps you kind of explain what your product does without being the hero. Because you don't want to be the hero. You want them to be the hero. So when you use those 4 constructs, you're not being the hero, you're just stating, would this change be impactful to you? Is this interesting? Would you like to talk? And that's how you'll get that Zoom meeting without giving them too much of what you do or how you do it.
Gotcha. So let me just repeat them back. It's before and after, without, love, hate, status change. Okay.
We're recording this too, so don't stress too much about the notes.
Oh no, I know I can go back and watch it later. I just want to make sure it gets
Yeah. But it sounds crazy, but I love the love hate one, because that is so emotional. I mean, before and after is good, and but the love hate, I mean, I think you could tell a lot of stories around that. And I'm a very visual person, so I'm picturing you again recording yourself, and I'll send you a sample of what I'm thinking. But I think you could even go a little bit further. I don't know how much time you have and how many people you're reaching out to, but if you see their job postings, you could talk about the love of the tools they actually mention on their website, but what they hate that probably none of them are working, or something like that. Like, you probably have, again, stories and examples that you can extract from this deck that you put together in a very succinct, this is what you love about what you could do with the tools, this is what you hate, and that's why you're hiring somebody or trying to.
No, that makes sense.
And then, you know, as Belal mentioned, you know, then they get on the call, and then you probably walk them through a little bit more detail of what exactly you do. But that to me doesn't seem like a lot of cognitive load. You're painting that picture for them, right? So they should be along for the ride and kind of hopefully watching and nodding.
Gotcha.
I'm curious, Jacob. So that time when you like had a friend of a friend and it went well is great. Have you had any other discovery type calls or active prospecting calls so far from your outreach?
We've had, so weirdly, we'll get them every now and then. Particularly, I had one call that actually was very interesting. Two, really. In both of those, we applied to the sales ops positions. My partner and I applied to different ones. We got interviews, and during the interview, we said, you know, hey, it looks like, you know, this is what you're looking for. You know, you're wanting an in-person resource, or you're wanting it for, you know, this price. And we wouldn't be able to do that, but we could do it via this, you know, ops as a service method. And it was very odd because on those calls, when we were able to talk with the people directly, in each one of them, they said, that's exactly what I want. And then they said, that's a great idea. That's exactly what I want. I hadn't really known that there was even another option. And then it was, okay, well, you know, let's, you know, talk about this. We can, you know, do something. And maybe, you know, actually not maybe, definitely it was on me for basically saying, well, hey, let's get another call going, opposed to sealing it right then and there. Like, yeah. So it scheduled another call, and it just, they kept getting pushed off, or it kept, you know, it eventually appeared. No more talk after that.
Are you saying that your feeling is that you should have like sealed the deal at that moment on the call?
Yeah, maybe trying to reschedule a call was a really bad idea.
So it's so funny, like as salespeople, like we think like we've got a successful call equals a close on that call, but you've got to consider, Jacob, like these people were thinking about hiring a human being. You're proposing something else. Naturally, that's not going to be a decision made with you there on the call. So yes, the way that you set the expectations for next steps are important, and maybe there's an opportunity to refine there. But I don't want you to think that you did anything wrong by not trying to push for a close in that moment, because it feels pretty unlikely that that would happen, even with the most seasoned of sellers.
Okay.
I'm also thinking, I'm curious what everybody else thinks in the group, but the story and using those 4 examples Bilal gave, I think that's prime LinkedIn content. Just put that out there daily, weekly. And then I'm also curious, I think I love stories and analogies. So there's got to be similar stories and analogies to what you do, where we hire someone to do something instead of hiring internally. There's probably 50 examples, they're just not coming to me, that I think would be interesting, where you could say, hey, you know how you hire this type of a person to take care of these problems? We do the same for X. And I think those would be really interesting. And again, not super cognitive, like heavy, where people are going, I don't really understand, where they can go, oh yeah, I hire someone to take care of that. Why wouldn't I hire somebody to take care of this?
Gotcha.
I don't know if that one would be as helpful for your second outreach video, but maybe just general content. It may be, because the emotive ones are good, but someone might be kind of going, well, yeah, but we should hire a sales ops person. But you might go, yeah, but you often contract or bring in someone from the outside to do this. Why wouldn't you bring somebody like those? And the reason I was thinking that is those people said that's exactly what we were looking for. So clearly there's some people out there going, why do we have to hire somebody? But we don't realize that this service off. And there's probably examples out there of something we all do now, naturally, we hire. And once we did it, we were like, why didn't we do this before?
Well, I mean, you could do the fun one of people, sorry, this is very, very basic, so forgive me, everyone. But in that sense of you know, what do you automate now? In that sense, you know, what do we automate? We automate online shopping and grocery orders, and you can get them set up to come every week. But then, you know, do you go one step further and look back at what you've bought over the year and then track that to your current eating habits? I don't exactly know how that would unfold, but I know where you're coming from, Francois, in that sense. And what's really embarrassing is that the first idea that came to mind was we used to have birthday books, and now how much do we rely on Facebook to tell us when people were born? So it's not, again, it's not the same thing that I would necessarily advocate you put in there, but I do absolutely know where you're coming from on that. And I think that you know, those analogies would just help to connect what you do from being something that's quite cerebral by the sounds of it to a practical, easy to grasp solution for people.
Mhm.
Do you
That's
find
fair.
yourself apologizing a lot on calls, by the way? Just out of interest.
Oh, not
No,
typically.
amazing. Okay.
Normally, I'm not very nervous. I'm very nervous when I'm like being recorded and everything.
Mm,
It's not coming through. I can't tell that
yeah,
you're nervous, so
exactly.
don't worry about it, Jacob. Yeah, I think that before and after also one scenario you could use is, before, when you go into a board meeting with your investors, you were nervous because you knew they were going to ask you all these questions and you knew you couldn't answer them. After state, so there's probably, I don't know, I'm guessing 10 before and after scenarios you could use as examples, that you may just want to keep dripping into their, LinkedIn, because they're interested. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Bilal, but they're unaware. So now these videos, they're interested. You're building that interest, and eventually they might go, okay, I've seen 5 or 6 examples. What was the third? I wrote down, it was unaware, interested, and then what were the next 3?
Aware, interest, consideration, evaluation, decision. Yeah.
So if you were thinking of like, if I was sending the videos to Jordana, that would kind of keep bringing the interest level up. What would you change, Bilal, maybe like from in terms of messaging from the consideration? Now you're not talking about the before and after. It's more almost like the tactical, okay, if we're working together, this is what it looks like.
Yeah, that's a good question, because you pointed out something interesting, Jacob, where you said your buyers don't realize there's a service out there like this, and that changes the equation quite a bit, because you have to know your buyer's conditioning. Like, I give you a small example of this. If we were selling toys and we said batteries not included, nobody bats an eye. If we were selling shoes and we said shoelaces not included, that doesn't work. Like, people would not buy the shoe, because shoes come with shoelaces. But aren't the laces just as functional to the shoe as the battery is to the toy? But for some reason, it's okay for batteries not to be included, but it's not okay for shoelaces not to be included. Like, our buyers are conditioned to different scenarios, and they find certain things acceptable and some things not. You just said that your buyer is unaware, typically, that there's even a service like this. Their assumption is there's only one way to solve this. You have to address that early and upfront. Your opening message should be, most people think they need to hire sales ops internally. I'd imagine you're one of those because I just saw the job you listed.
Ooh.
Did you even know that there's an alternative? An alternative that can, and then you either use your before and after without love, hate, or change in some sort of state or status quo. Because that's what you'd want to address. And then if they show interest, to your question, Francois, if they show interest, that's when you want to get into why you would want to do this alternative route, which is lesser known, but probably more effective in the long run. Just like, and we were thinking of analogies, one comes to mind that's maybe nearer to sales, which is like sales training. Like most sales teams need sales training. They're not going to go hire a sales trainer. You don't bring a sales trainer in-house until very, very later on. In the early days, you just outsource it, because you don't need a sales trainer there every single day. You just need them there for certain moments. In the same way, this might be the state with what you're selling, these sales ops as a service. It's like, do you really need somebody in-house, or do you just need to solve some really critical issues now? Because if you're in the latter camp, I got something to show you. If you're not, my bad. Sorry, nothing. But I would address that very early and upfront. Like, you should be the one leading that. You should be telling your buyer, hey, I know you weren't thinking of this. I knew you probably thought that you're only supposed to hire someone. Guess what? There is an alternative. Here's what it can do for you. Would you be interested?
Gotcha.
Yeah, that make sure you rewatch the recording, because he gave you basically the exact copy you should use.
So good, Belal, so good.
Right. I'm just gonna have to rewatch all of this.
So after in that consideration, I think what would be interesting is, again, a video with you in it, because I think it's always important that element is there, and basically like a comparison, right? This is what it looks like to hire someone, and all the maybe all the cons, if you will, and then this is what it's like to bring us in all the pros. And it's like red X's and green check marks, like just slaps them in the face. Like, why wouldn't you do this?
Gotcha. You said that service would be Loom, Loom, or Lum?
Yeah, I'll send you a couple videos. I use Drift and Loom. I think there's probably 5 or 6 out there, to be honest. But it's an easy way to drop something in their DMs, and they see the little snippet of the video, and they'll see, look, it's 1 minute, and then they can watch it.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
And Jordana, I thought I heard you start to say something, and I apologize. I talked over you.
Oh, I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. Or maybe I did, but I forgot it. But yeah, no.
For some reason, the analogy, and you guys, I'd love to hear, this is crazy, like a plumber, it keeps coming to my mind. And obviously most people wouldn't have a full-time plumber employed unless you were a large company, but like, I'm trying to think of almost something like mechanical here, right? Like they have all these things, whether it's an electrician or a plumber. And again, like you're bringing that plumber in to get everything working. I don't know if that's a great analogy, but something might come to me. But again, I think there's something there, because the piece that you were talking to earlier that I'm trying to find an analogy to work for is, essentially they have all these tools that are supposed to help them sell better, probably get better metrics, and they're not. And I'm just trying to think of an analogy where you bring someone in and it's like, I'm supposed to have all these great things and they're just not working. And it might be a plumber, because, pardon the pun, but if it doesn't work, it's probably pretty shitty.
Oh, Francois. Oh.
We thought we were going to make a whole hour without a dad joke, and we didn't.
Jacob, I think what I was going to say is, earlier when I asked, have you actually had the chance to have these more extended conversations? And I know we only have 10 minutes left, but I'm just curious if you have a sense. So let's say we use Belal's awesome messaging and we get them in and they're ready to talk with you. Do you have a sense of what the structure of those calls looks like?
Not really. No, off the top of my head.
Okay, yeah. Do you and the team internally talk about like this discovery and what that is, and the kinds of questions that you're going to need to ask before actually introducing more details about the product?
We've started to. My partner and I, the last 3 weeks, we've started to have more conversations like that. At first, it was just kind of, hey, let's just see if we can get a conversation. Now it's more, okay, we've sent out enough. We can start to go back to these things and see what's working. Because we're data people, so anytime there's data, we're like, yay. But now we're starting to go back and go, yeah, longer messages are not good. Longer conversations are not good. Whatever we can do to make it.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about figuring out what works and what doesn't. Okay, that makes sense. I think what I was talking about is like when you get the prospect on the phone, in advance of going right into your slide presentation or talking about your product, it's going to be really important for you to get a pretty thorough understanding of their world and the problems that they're hoping to solve by this hire. If you're reaching out to people who are posting for jobs, do you have an approach or a bank of questions or any sense of like the information that you need to gather in order to responsibly and credibly say, actually, this thing that we have can meet these very specific challenges that you've shared with us?
Gotcha. Yes, we do have those. We tend to ask them about what systems they're using, what sort of analytics they have. We tend, the big one that we'll always ask is, do you your win rate? Do you know why your win rate is that way? And that's sort of where people start to go, no, I don't know why my win rate is what it is. I know it's there, but I don't know what's affecting it. And that's sort of where we can kind of have.
Let me just drill into that a little bit. So let's say Jordana, you'd reached out to her, you sent her a video, and now she kind of is, okay, like, let's get into maybe that first, I don't know if it's the engagement, but maybe let's work together, almost their conversation. Do you have like, I don't want to focus on a deck, but something that walks them or paints the picture of, here's the 1, 2, 3, or 4 things we're going to discuss and what we get out of them? Almost like not just an agenda, but here's the topics we're going to cover, and this is what we're going to get out of it, which will give us X.
I don't think we have anything formalized. It's more just kind of conceptually in our head. We walk through 4 things, you know, the analytics, enablement, processes, and systems, and we just kind of ask a couple of questions of each one of those, but we don't have it standardized and set and all of that.
Because I think that would be helpful. Sorry, Jordana, I think that would be helpful almost as like another piece of content to send people. So if you know, you keep giving them these great emotional before and after love-hate scenarios, and they're watching them and they're not saying, stop sending me this, then you can say, hey, if we get on a call, here's the 4 things we're going to do. And again, visual. Step 1, we're going to ask you these things, which will tell us this. Step 2, we're going to do these things, which will give us this. So then they actually are like, oh, awesome. If I get on a call with Jacob next Friday, this is what he's going to ask me. And then, you know, after these 4 steps, he's going to tell me, we think it'll take this much time to do that. Like, you want to show them what the finish line looks like. But again, you don't want to make it sound too, you don't want to undersell like, hey, we just get on one call and it's really super simple. But, you know, I guess I'm trying to say you want to show the value in what you do, but again, easy, like make them feel like, okay, this is going to be easy. He's going to walk us through these steps and solve the problems.
Gotcha.
It's exactly like Bilal said earlier, that you want to reduce the cognitive load of engaging with you. It's not just about, you know, grasping a concept and you know, being able to digest it. It's about the actual act of engaging with you from a business perspective. It needs to be facilitated, I suppose, in that sense. And, you know, from my side of the house with the linguistics, we use meta-linguistics to help facilitate better interactions, because you're not going to reduce the newness of a concept. So when you get on a demo, you know exactly that it's going to be potentially 20 minutes worth of time. At the end of that, we're going to move into our second phase call. We're going to follow up with you via an email, and then you do the things you say you're going to do, which on the emotional side of things is building your trust and your rapport. But it also means that when it comes to engaging, people are prepared and understand what's expected of them, which helps them make the decision to go on and do that. You know, if you know what's going to happen, you're much more likely to be able to say, yeah, okay, rather than possibly, you know, find yourself succumbing to fear of the unknown, which I think is where a lot of people are like, do you know what, it's going to take an hour, I can't be bothered, I'm not going to do this. And in actual fact, what you want to do is make it as easy for them as possible to do business with you. And sometimes that looks like facilitating their experience with you, which sounds a bit clinical, but it does make the whole business so much smoother.
Gotcha.
People hate ambiguity. You know,
Yeah.
they really love to know, like, they want this problem solved. You've reminded them, hey, I have this problem. They want to see the steps. They want to kind of understand, this is where I want to be, and Jacob's going to take me through. It could be 10 steps, but they'd rather they know there's 10 versus, okay, he's told me I have a problem. He's told me he can fix it. I have no idea what's going to happen in the middle. People don't like that, and they'll probably just kind of push it to the side. Whereas if you kind of keep painting that picture for them, then, you know, they can go, okay, yeah, I can see myself doing this. And even if it's, and again, in a story format of, this is what we did with another client, these are the 10 steps we took, these are the outcomes, so they can see themselves there.
Gotcha.
I feel like we gave you a ton of homework.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. This is, I mean, I feel like I've gone through 6 months of school in an hour, and it feels fantastic.
Well, what were you going to say?
I'll give you a trade secret, Jacob, to make this really easy here. Can I share screen? Is that possible?
Yeah, hold on. Let me just make sure you
All
can.
right. I'll show you some here, Jacob, you could use to facilitate these conversations, because LinkedIn just did a state of sales report. The #1 answer on what buyers want from a seller is active listening. So the #1 thing out of everything they ever want is just a seller to actively listen to them. And the best way to show that you're actively listening is by actually like drawing what they say. So this is like what I use when I'm prospecting, where people will be talking to me and I'll take notes live. I'll be like, oh, what's your CRM? Okay, it's Salesforce, great. And then what's your work suite? Okay, you're on G Suite, cool. And I just use Google Jamboard, which is free. And as people are talking to me, I'm moving around the sticky notes and paying attention to what they say. And then I just take them through a set of slides. Some of them are already drawn. Some of them I actually draw for them. And people really, really like this experience because it shows that I'm actively listening. I'm taking notes on what they say, and I share it with them afterwards. So I recommend you just go to Google Jamboard. It's free. Make a Jamboard of the sort of discussion you want to have with people that takes them through the things that you want to cover and gives them the ability to contribute to that conversation. And that's the way you have those initial discussions before you ever send a pitch deck. Because again, you got to get them into consideration. So once you get them from unaware to aware, and then they have some interest and they want to meet with you, they're not evaluating yet. They're just interested. The way you get them to consider is by using something like that to facilitate it. And there's no better way to show that you're actively listening than to be taking the notes live in front of them and putting it up right there. It's very comforting when you're like, wow, this guy's really listening to me. This is like happening in my face.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
What would you guys think about doing almost like, hey, here's something we did with another client, almost like a mock note-taking and output of that note-taking and sending that to them so they can see, here's what I'm going to do with you.
I think if you can condense it, it would probably be a really nice way just to say, look, when we get here, don't, if this is new to you, don't worry about it. We've done this before and this is our process. If you can make it super short and sweet, just in exactly the same way that Belal did there. Yeah, I would say this is how we're gonna facilitate it. So when you show up and you see me drawing things and doing sticky notes, don't worry. This is all part of our process to make sure that we understand exactly what it is that you're going through, and that we've got it all in the one place. We can come back to it later. And then you're fostering a sort of sense of collaboration, I think, between you. But Jordana, I would love your thoughts there as well, realize I'm jumping in.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, it reminds me too of in Todd's book, he talks about like mutual decision plans and just the idea of really laying out the steps and filling in approximate dates together and both having tasks, right? So that it's clear that that you and your prospect are actively working together and communicating to get through the buying process. I just can't recommend Todd's book enough to. So
Awesome. Okay, I know we're at the top of the hour. I appreciate everybody making time. Belal, hopefully your wife's in good shape. Thanks for making time, everyone. Have a fantastic weekend. I'll reach back out to you, Jake, with some follow-up info as well.
Awesome. And thank you guys so much. This was very enlightening hour. I really appreciate your time.
You bet,
awesome.
man.
You guys.
Pleasure.
Everyone, thanks so much.